think we're back. Yes, wonderful. Welcome back, everyone, my lovely Librophiles. Welcome to my library. We return to Anne of Green Gables. We're going to be starting on chapter 11 today. Uh, so let's see here. Got that ready. I have more beverages than I know what to do with today. I've got a black tea with brown sugar boba flavor. I've got a energy drink, and I've got a huge container full of water. Because someone may or may not have strained an intercostal between my ribs. So, gotta stay hydrated. Okay, I'm gonna move my black velvet plant out of the way now that it has been watered. There we go. All right. Without further ado, I shall go ahead and start reading here. Chapter 11. Anne's Impressions of Sunday School. Gotta remember to sit properly. Well, how do you like them? Said Marilla. Anne was standing in the gable room, looking solemnly at 3 new dresses spread out on the bed. One was a snuffy-colored gingham which Marilla had been tempted to buy from a peddler the preceding summer because it looked so serviceable. One was of black and white checked sateen which she had picked up at a bargain counter in the winter, and one was a stiff print of an ugly blue shade which she had purchased that week at a Carmody store. I wasn't aware that blue could ever be an ugly color, but we shall see. Also, interesting little detail on that open image in Noob. There's some texture here. It's almost like RF something imprinted into the page. How odd. She had made them up herself, and they were all made alike. Plain skirts, fold tightly to plain waists, with sleeves as plain as waist and skirt and tight as sleeves could be. Oh, welcome in. That was Nicola Bazooka. What a wonderful name. Nicola. I'll imagine that I like them, said Anne soberly. I don't want you to imagine it, said Marilla, offended. Oh, I can see you don't like the dresses. What is the matter with them? Aren't they neat and clean and new? Yes. Then why don't you like them? They're not pretty, said Anne reluctantly. Pretty? Marilla sniffed. I didn't trouble my head about getting pretty dresses for you. I don't believe in pampering vanity, Anne. I'll tell you that right off. Those dresses are good, sensible, serviceable dresses without any frills or furbelows about them, and they're all you'll get this summer. The brown gingham and the blue print will do you for school when you begin to go. The sateen is for church and Sunday school. I'll expect you to keep them neat and clean and not to tear them. I should think you'd be grateful to get most anything after those skimpy, wincey things you've been wearing. Oh, I am grateful, protested Anne, but I'd be ever so much gratefuller if you'd made just one of them with puffed sleeves. Puffed sleeves are so fashionable now. It would give me such a thrill, Marilla, just to wear a dress with puffed sleeves. Well, you'll have to do without your thrill. I hadn't any material to waste on puffed sleeves. I think they are ridiculous-looking things anyhow. I prefer the plain, sensible ones. But I'd rather look ridiculous when everybody else does than plain and sensible all by myself, persisted Anne mournfully. Trust you for that. Well, hang those dresses carefully up in your closet, and then sit down and learn the Sunday school lesson. I got a quarterly from Mr. Bell for you, and you'll go to Sunday school tomorrow," said Marilla, disappearing downstairs in high dudgeon. 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 Interesting. I don't think I've ever seen that word before. Let me... Useful links, dictionary.com, Dudgeon. 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 Okay. Dudgeon. A feeling of offense or resentment, anger. Synonyms pick indignation. He had every right to express his dudgeon. The more you learn. Said Marilla, disappearing downstairs in high dudgeon. Anne clasped her hands and looked at the dresses. "I did hope there would be a white one with puffed sleeves," she whispered disconsolately. "I prayed for one, but I didn't much expect it on that account. I didn't suppose God would have the time to bother about a little orphan girl's dress. I knew I'd just have to depend on Marilla for it. Well, fortunately, I can imagine that one of them is of snow-white muslin with lovely lace frills and 3 puffed sleeves." 3 puffed sleeves. Ugh. Absolutely not. The next morning, warnings of a sick headache prevented Marilla from going to Sunday school with Anne. "You'll have to go down and call for Mrs. Lynde, Anne," she said. "She'll see that you get into the right class. Now, mind you behave yourself properly. Stay to preaching afterwards and ask Mrs. Lynde to show you our pew. Here's a cent for collection. Don't stare at people and don't fidget. I shall expect you to tell me the text when you come home." Anne started off irreproachably, arrayed in the stiff black and white sateen, which, while decent as regards length and certainly not open to the charge of skimpiness, contrived to emphasize every corner and angle of her thin figure. Her hat was a little flat, glossy new sailor, the extreme plainness of which had likewise much disappointed Anne, who had permitted herself secret visions of ribbon and flowers. The latter, however, were supplied before Anne reached the main road, for, being confronted halfway down the lane with a golden frenzy of wind-stirred buttercups and a glory of wild roses, Anne promptly and liberally garlanded her hat with a heavy wreath of them. Whatever other people might have thought of the result, it satisfied Anne, and she tripped gaily down the road, holding her ruddy head with its decoration of pink and yellow very proudly. When she reached Mrs. Lynde's house, she found that lady gone. Nothing daunted, Anne proceeded onward to the church alone. In the porch, she found a crowd of little girls, all more or less gaily attired in whites and blues and pinks, and all staring with curious eyes at the stranger in their midst, with her extraordinary head adornment. Avonlea, Avonlea, little girls had already heard queer stories about Anne. Mrs. Lynde said she had an awful temper. Jerry Buote? Buote? Jerry Buote, the hired boy at Green Gables, said she talked all the time to herself or to the trees and flowers like a crazy girl. They looked at her and whispered to each other behind their quarterlies. Nobody made any friendly advances then or later on when the opening exercises were over, and Anne found herself in Miss Rogerson's class. Miss Rogerson was a middle-aged lady who had taught a Sunday school class for 20 years. Her method of teaching was to ask the printed questions from the quarterly and look sternly over its edge at the particular little girl she thought ought to answer the question. She looked very often at Anne, and Anne, thanks to Marilla's drilling, answered promptly. But it may be questioned if she understood very much about either question or answer. She did not think she liked Mrs. Rogerson, and she felt very miserable. Every other little girl in the class had puffed sleeves. Anne felt that life was really not worth living without puffed sleeves. Oh, to be a little girl. The little girl's problems. Oh, jeez. Well, how did you like Sunday school? Marilla wanted to know when Anne came home. Her wreath having faded, Anne had discarded it in the lane, so Marilla was spared the knowledge of that for a time. I didn't like it a bit. It was horrid. Anne Shirley, said Marilla rebukingly. Anne sat down on the rocker with a long sigh, kissed one of Bonnie's leaves. Mind you, Bonnie is the apple tree that is just outside her window, for context. Kissed one of Bonnie's leaves and waved her hand to a blossoming fuchsia. They might have been lonesome while I was away, she explained, and now about the Sunday school. I behaved well, just as you told me. Mrs. Lynde was gone, but I went right on myself. I went into the church with a lot of other little girls, and I sat in the corner of a pew by the window while the opening exercises went on. Mr. Bell made an awfully long prayer. I would have been dreadfully tired before he got through if I hadn't been sitting by that window. But it looked right out on the lake of shining waters. So I just gazed at that and imagined all sorts of splendid things. You shouldn't have done anything of the sort. You should have listened to Mr. Bell. But he wasn't talking to me, protested Anne. He was talking to God, and he didn't seem to be very much interested in it either. I think he thought God was too far off to make it worthwhile. I said a little prayer myself, though. There was a long row of white birches hanging over the lake, and the sunshine fell down through them way, way down, deep into the water. Oh, Marilla, it was like a beautiful dream. It gave me a thrill, and I just said, "Thank you for it, God," 2 or 3 times. Not out loud, I hope, said Marilla anxiously. Oh no, just under my breath. Well, Mr. Bell did get through at last, and they told me to go into the classroom with Miss Rogerson's class. There were 9 other girls in it. They all had puff sleeves. I tried to imagine mine were puffed too, but I couldn't. Why couldn't I? It was as easy as could be to imagine they were puffed when I was alone in the East Gable, but it was awfully hard there among the others who had really, truly puffs. You shouldn't have been thinking about your sleeves in Sunday school. You should have been attending to the lesson. I hope you knew it. Oh, yes. And I answered a lot of questions. Miss Rogerson asked ever so many. I don't think it was fair of her to do all the asking. There were lots I wanted to ask her, but I didn't like to because I didn't think she was a kindred spirit. Then all the other little girls recited a paraphrase. She asked me if I knew any. I told her I didn't, but I could recite The Dog at His Master's Grave if she liked. That's in the Third Royal Reader. It isn't a really truly religious piece of poetry, but it's so sad and melancholy that it might as well be. She said it wouldn't do, and she told me to learn the 19th paraphrase for next Sunday. I read it over in church afterwards, and it's splendid. There are 2 lines in particular that just thrill me. Quick as the slaughtered squadrons fell in Midian's evil day. I don't know what squadrons means, or Midian, either, but it sounds so tragical. I can hardly wait until next Sunday to recite it. I'll practice it all the week. After Sunday school, I asked Miss Rogerson, because Mrs. Lynde was too far away, to show me your pew. I sat just as still as I could, and the text was Revelation's 3rd chapter, 2nd and 3rd verses. It was a very long text. If I was a minister, I'd pick the short, snappy ones. The sermon was awfully long, too. I suppose the minister had to match it to the text. I didn't think he was a bit interesting. The trouble with him seems to be that he hasn't enough imagination. I didn't listen to him very much. I just let my thoughts run, and I thought of the most surprising things. Marilla felt helplessly that all this should be sternly reproved, but she was hampered by the undeniable fact that some of the things Anne had said, especially about the minister's sermons and Mr. Bell's prayers, were what she herself had really thought deep down in her heart for years, but had never given expression to. It almost seemed to her that those secret, unuttered, critical thoughts had suddenly taken visible and accusing shape and form in the person of this outspoken morsel of neglected humanity. Yeah, yeah, that sounds about right. Um, so if you haven't been here before, and welcome in, I just want to tell you that the way that Lucy Montgomery wrote Anne of Green Gables is just full of this colorful whimsy because it's set in Nova Scotia. I keep mispronouncing Avonlea. Avonlea. It's I don't know why I'm struggling with it, but just it doesn't look like any word that I have ever said before, so I think that's why I struggle. But that was chapter 11. And if you haven't been here before, you might not know that between chapters, I try to make sure that everyone is taking care of themselves. When I go to other streamers' streams, I'm usually like, hey, don't forget to stretch, fix your back. You look like a banana. Hydrate, caffeinate, do whatever you need um, to feel good, feel better. I have a total of 3. I'm going to go ahead and pull these up here. I went ahead and added 3 of the finished emotes that I had commissioned from Yuki. So let me go ahead and grab those. Of course, the 3 that I have, let's see, let me put... Da, 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 da. This one, and this one. There we go. So I have open link. There we go. So these are the 3 that I've added so far. I went ahead and added and updated the bonk. So if you need to give me the good bonk, you can. Here. Oh! Wild is rating in. That's so great. Welcome in, dear raiders. Oh, Bardic. Hi, Debbie. Hi, Wild. Welcome in. Welcome in, you guys. I was just showing some of the emotes that I got commissioned, and I just added to my list of emotes. I am doing quite well. Thank you for asking. Tiny, and I mean Debbie, Tiny, Deuce, Starry, Otaku Dan, Wild. It was great watching Wild stream and watch you guys all play. I don't know how you can do it. My heart would be just beating 1,000 miles a minute, just like I scare so easily. That's why I don't typically play those sorts of games. But man, it is such a rush just watching. And if I can startle Wild in the process, like with an occasional dicks, and just get him to go, it's totally worth it. I suppose the anxiety is part of the fun. Yeah. Yeah, you play with your hearts going ba-dump anyway. Let's go ahead and get a shout out for Wild, because I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure that most of you that just hopped in kind of have been here before, but we'll go ahead and get a shout out anyway. I wonder, as a side note, Wild has a new model coming, I think, in
Well,
September.
might as well.
Oh my goodness. Look, that's your old model.
Damn it, Zia.
Oh my
I'll go
goodness.
find a med pack.
Oh, there's one upstairs.
Wow. It's like
Oh.
looking at history.
Not even an animation, just a block.
Wild was
No, just
Wild. Your
blip.
model has changed
Still worth
so
it.
much.
I love jumping off the
love the
things.
armor though. That's very consistent. That it was really cool. Yep, Panda's old. Yeah, we're all constantly evolving and developing our style and then what makes us happy. Also, thank you so much for the follow, Bardic. Just I'll go through the blurb real quick. Welcome to my library. If this is your first visit, I am Vexing Cat. You can call me Vex or Vexing. I'm a retro tiger librarian. I read classic literature and poetry, and occasionally play games. And I'm looking into
Hi.
Hi. Yeah, that's one of my new emotes too, and a sound alert to go with it. Um, I am also looking into possibly reading smut. I don't know. I would like to, expand my literary content to include more. I did a lot of focus in October on more horror based, and I'll probably talk about that. Um, that'll be closer to the end of the month there. I'm going to be visiting Wild, and we'll be talking. We'll talking about horror literature and what truly terrifies me. And I don't know. I'm a big nerd for media of all kinds, so I read some, watch some, play the odd game. Yeah, I think it'll be nice. I think that's coming up on what, the 19th? Bear with me. That's a Sunday. Yeah, Sunday the 19th, I think is what you said you was available. So, um yeah, that'll be Sunday in a few weeks. Aw, thank you, Hikara. Thank you so much for the gifted sub. Um I have completely gone off the rails. I am currently reading Anne of Green Gables, which is by that's Lucy Maud Montgomery, um, a Canadian author. I just finished chapter 11. I wanted to talk a little bit about the emotes that I had commissioned. I have quite a few more, but they're going to be on standby. But I wanted to share some of them because I wanted to update some of the alerts, like the bonk emote. If somebody wants to give me the bonk, the hi is new. Before it said hi, it didn't really do anything. But now bonk actually.
Hi.
Yep. So funny. I love the sound. So here's the bonk emote. This is the hi emote, so you can wave. And then the third one that I added was the snack time, eating a cookie emote. It's just so cute. I like the little diamond shape eyes, because believe it or not, tiger eyes are similar to more like more like human eyes. Their irises don't constrict into like a cat-like, what shape would that be? It's not really a diamond shape, but you know what I'm talking about. Like, it's pointy on the top and the bottom. Tiger eyes actually constrict in a circular way. Um, so it's kind of interesting. The big cats don't have the same. Maybe I was thinking ellipses, but I'm not really sure. I'd have to look it up. But I digress. Those are the emotes, and I have quite a few more. And that same artist is working on the animated ones. I have migrated the ones that I have removed to the Better Twitch TV. So that way people that still want to use the ones from Katsu Cookie or dip, 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 or use this high emote. Just they're funny. I haven't quite figured out how to access them when I'm on somebody else's channel, but you know, that is for future vexing to figure out. But Anyway, thank you all for sticking around. I'll go ahead and continue with chapter 12. Wild, um, Wild, Tiny, Devi, Bruce, Otako Dan, Starry, whoever else might have been watching, if you guys need to take a break, hydrate, caffeinate, grab a snack, curl up with a good blanket. Do what you need to do. I think so. But
Drink water.
Yep.
Become moist.
I need to update that one. That's clearly grabbing the wrong image file. So write that down. One more thing. Okay, so update. Update. Hydrate. Okay. But yeah, I've got the alerts that are being made for follow.
Don't forget to stretch.
That one has not changed. That one is still the same. Yes, buff tiger. Yes. Very strong. Incidentally, I just got my weights delivered yesterday. I'm pretty excited. I can actually do some. I might add some redeems like Impy Ivo or Nismo. They all Nimsy's got these redeems like, do barbell curls or push-ups or squats. One is happy to be of service. Aw. Future vexing sounds good. I'm always leaving things for future day. Yes. Well, future vexing writes down notes and then follows up with them like, oh yeah, that's important. I should do that thing. ADHD is a curse, unfortunately, in some regards. Very talented at figuring out problems, really terrible about remembering to do them. Yeah. Okay. Let's refocus a little bit and go back to reading. Let's see. Anne of Green Gables, chapter 12. A solemn vow and promise. It was not until the next Friday that Marilla heard the story of the flower-wreathed hat. She came home from Mrs. Lynde's and called Anne to account. Anne, Mrs. Rachel says you went to church last Sunday with your hat rigged out ridiculous with roses and buttercups. What on earth put you up to such a caper? A pretty-looking object you must have been. Oh, I know, pink and yellow aren't becoming to me, began Anne. Becoming fiddlesticks. Great word, fiddlesticks. It was putting flowers on your hat at all, no matter what color they were. That was ridiculous. You are the most aggravating child. I don't see why it's any more ridiculous to wear flowers on your hat than on your dress, protested Anne. Lots of little girls there had bouquets pinned on their dresses. What was the difference? Marilla was not to be drawn from the safe concrete into dubious paths of the abstract. Don't answer me back like that, Anne. It was very silly of you to do such a thing. Never let me catch you at such a trick again. Mrs. Rachel says she thought she would sink through the floor when she saw you come in all rigged out like that. She couldn't get near enough to tell you to take them off till it was too late. She says people talked about it something dreadful. Of course they would think I had no better sense than to let you go decked out like that. Oh, I'm so sorry, said Anne, tears welling into her eyes. I never thought you'd mind. The roses and buttercups were so sweet and pretty. I thought they'd look lovely on my hat. Lots of the little girls had artificial flowers on their hats. I'm afraid I'm going to be a dreadful trial to you. Maybe you'd better send me back to the asylum. That would be terrible. I don't think I could endure it. Most likely I would go into consumption. I'm so thin as it is, you see. But that would be better than being a trial to you. Nonsense, said Marilla, vexed at herself for having made the child cry. I don't want to send you back to the asylum, I'm sure. All I want is that you should behave like other little girls and not make yourself ridiculous. Don't cry any more. I've got some news for you. Diana Barry came home this afternoon. I'm going to see if I can borrow a skirt pattern from Mrs. Barry, and if you like, you can come with me and get acquainted with Diana. Anne rose to her feet with clasped hands, the tears still glistening on her cheeks. The dish towel she had been hemming slipped unheeded to the floor. Oh, Marilla, I'm frightened. Now that it has come, I'm actually frightened. What if she shouldn't like me? It would be the most tragical disappointment of my life. Now don't get into a fluster, and I do wish you wouldn't use such long words. It sounds so funny in a little girl. I guess Diana'll like you well enough. It's her mother you've got to reckon with. If she doesn't Oh, goodness. No, no, no. If she doesn't like you, it won't matter how much Diana does. If she has heard about your outburst to Mrs. Lynde and going to church with buttercups round your hat, I don't know what she'll think of you. You must be polite and well behaved, and don't make any of your startling speeches, for pity's sake, if the child isn't actually trembling. Anne was trembling. Her face was pale and tense. Oh, Marilla, you should be excited too. If you were going to meet a little girl you hoped to be your bosom friend and whose mother mightn't, ugh, English, and whose mother mightn't like you, she said as she hastened to get her hat. They went over to Orchard Slope, by the shortcut across the brook and up the Fiery? Fury? Maybe. Up the Fury Hill Grove. Mrs. Barry came to the kitchen door in answer to Marilla's knock. She was a tall, black-eyed, black-haired woman with a very resolute mouth. She had the reputation of being very strict with her children. How do you do, Marilla? She said cordially. Come in. And this is the little girl you have adopted, I suppose. Yes, this is Anne Shirley, said Marilla. Spelled with an E, gasped Anne, who, tremulous and excited as she was determined there should be no misunderstanding on that important point. Mrs. Barry, not hearing, or not comprehending, merely shook hands and said kindly, How are you? I am well in body, although considerably rumpled up in spirit. Thank you, ma'am, said Anne gravely. Then, aside to Marilla in an audible whisper, There wasn't anything startling in that, was there, Marilla? Diana was sitting on the sofa, reading a book which she dropped when the callers entered. She was a very pretty little girl with her mother's black eyes and hair and rosy cheeks and the merry expression which was her inheritance from her father. This is my little girl, Diana, said Mrs. Barry. Diana, you might take Anne out into the garden and show her your flowers. It will be better for you than straining your eyes over that book. She reads entirely too much, this to Marilla as the little girls went out, and I can't prevent her, for her father aids and abets her. She's always poring over a book. I'm glad she has the prospect of a playmate. Perhaps it will take her more out of doors. Outside in the garden, which was full of mellow sunset, light streaming through the dark old firs to the west of it, stood Anne and Diana gazing bashfully at one another over a clump of gorgeous tiger lilies. Hey! The berry garden was a bowery wilderness of flowers which would have delighted Anne's heart at any time less fraught with destiny. It was encircled by huge old willows and tall firs, beneath which flourished flowers that loved the shade. Prim, right-angled paths, neatly bordered with clamshells, intersected it like moist red ribbons, and in the beds between old-fashioned flowers ran riot. There were rosy bleeding hearts and great splendid crimson peonies, white fragrant narcissi, and thorny sweet Scotch roses. Pink and blue and white columbines, and lilac-tinted bouncing bats. Clumps of southern wood and ribbon grasp and mint, purple Adam and Eve, daffodils, and masses of sweet clover white with its delicate, fragrant, feathery sprays. Scarlet lightning that shot its fiery lances over prim white musk flowers? I'm guessing musk. White musk flowers, a garden it was where sunshine lingered and bees hummed and winds beguiled into loitering purred and rustled. The way she writes her prose is like drinking sweet nectar from the gods. She's just, mwah. It's delicious to read, albeit a bit of a mouthful. Oh, Diana, said Anne at last, clasping her hands and speaking almost in a whisper, do you think you can like me a little, enough to be my bosom friend? Diana laughed. Diana always laughed before she spoke. Why, I guess so, she said frankly. I'm awfully glad you've come to live at Green Gables. It will be jolly to have somebody to play with. There isn't any other girl who lives near enough to play with, and I've no sisters big enough. Will you swear to be my friend forever and ever? Demanded Anne eagerly. Diana looked shocked. Why, it's dreadfully wicked to swear, she said rebukingly. Oh, no, not my kind of swearing. There are two kinds, you know. I never heard of but one kind, said Diana doubtfully. There really is another. Oh, it isn't wicked at all. It just means vowing and promising solemnly. Well, I don't mind doing that, agreed Diana, relieved. How do you do it? Side note, it is kind of interesting to swear, like to swear an oath, to vow, to solemnly agree to something or promise something, is also the same word swear as to say a not safe for work word, or to, be uncouth and say something rude to someone. Um, like I would be very, very rude and swearing if I was playing a horror game. It's like, son of a bitch! Incidentally, this is an 18 plus stream, so if you are not 18 plus, I appreciate you hanging out, but be forewarned, I do read. And I do swear. Ha. So I'm kind of curious why that evolved in quite that way, that those are the same word for this two diametrically opposite things. Aw, thank you, Starry. Starry Fina, it was one of the players in Wildstream today. Starry is also great content creator. I've seen a couple of their streams as well. I'm always lurking. I'm very quiet, mellow, and I'm just like, even if I don't have a lot to say, I will keep people's streams up. So, yeah, I've been following for a while. You should check out their content too. Let's see. I think I can do another shout out. We should do that now. I wonder if it'll show. I've got Starfina. There we go. Oni fans enjoy.
Our opponents have cojones to face our united front.
I know I have the cojones for these ladies. Hello, hello.
It doesn't even show your model. That's so funny.
I think this is gonna work. This is gonna. Oh my god! Look at the money. Look at the money. Oh. Do I have more? No, I can't ban that. Yes. More Chinese. China #1. Go. Spend all the money.
But you do stream. You attend others, and you're very supportive. And you're another one of the creators from Underrealm. Dying of cringe. Well, yes. Yes. Read between the lines. I knew what you meant. But yes. Yeah. Starfina, you should start streaming again. Play games. Do things that bring you joy. Um, Reading is one of the things that brings me joy, and sharing my love of literature and the classics with others is part of why I started streaming in the first place. Yep, taking an oath is a way to swear, but can also be swear words, correct? Oaths can be swear words. That I did not know, actually. ASMR, safe place, welcome in. If this is your first time to my library, since a couple of you have followed very recently, only Oni fans and ASMR safe place. I am Vexing Cat. Welcome to my library. I read classic literature and poetry, and occasionally play video games or D&D. And feel free to get settled in. Grab a book or grab a blanket, grab a snack. I'm reading Anne of Green Gables, and this is chapter 12. All right, I digress. We'll get back to it. I do want to get to the etymology of why swearing an oath, and swear words evolved from the same root. That's a future vexing. Well, I don't mind doing that, agreed Diana, relieved. How do you do it? We must join hands. So, said Anne gravely, it ought to be over running water. We'll just imagine this path is running water. I'll repeat the oath first. I solemnly swear to be faithful to my bosom friend, Diana Barry, as long as the sun and moon shall endure. Now you say it and put my name in. This is very serious. Diana repeated the oath with a laugh fore and aft. Then she said, You're a queer girl, Anne. I heard before that you were queer, but I believe I'm going to like you real well. When Marilla and Anne went home, Diana went with them as far as the log bridge. The two little girls walked with their arms about each other. At the brook they parted with many promises to spend the next afternoon together. Well, did you find Diana a kindred spirit? Asked Marilla, as they went up through the garden of Green Gables. Oh, yes, sighed Anne, blissfully unconscious of any sarcasm on Marilla's part. Oh, Marilla, I'm the happiest girl on Prince Edward Island this very moment. I assure you I'll say my prayers with a right good will tonight. Diana and I are going to build a playhouse in Mr. William Bell's Birch Grove tomorrow. Can I have those broken pieces of china that are out in the woodshed? Diana's birthday is in February and mine is in March. Don't you think that is a very strange coincidence? Diana is going to lend me a book to read. She says it's perfectly splendid and tremendously tremendously exciting. Is that a word? I don't think I've seen that word before either. Can't be. Tremendously? Did I spell it correctly? Perhaps this is a word that changed over time. Tree men justly. Tree men just. Huh. I'm guessing that word changed with time. Tremendously. Weird word. Okay. She says it's perfectly splendid and tremendously exciting. She's going to show me a place back in the woods where rice lilies grow. Don't you think Diana has got very soulful eyes? I wish I had soulful eyes. Diana is going to teach me to sing a song called Nellie in the Hazel Dell. She's going to give me a picture to put up in my room. It's a perfectly beautiful picture, she says, a lovely lady in a pale blue silk dress. A sewing machine agent gave it to her. I wish I had something to give Diana. I'm an inch taller than Diana, but she's ever so much fatter. She says she'd like to be thin because it's so much more graceful, but I'm afraid she only said it to soothe my feelings. We're going to the shore some day to gather shells. We have agreed to call the spring down by the log bridge for the Dryad's Bubble. Isn't that a perfectly elegant name? I read a story once about a spring called that. A dryad is a sort of grown-up fairy, I think. Poor Marilla. The excitement of this child. Oh dear. Well, all I hope is you won't talk Diana to death, said Marilla. But remember, this is all your planning, Anne. You're not going to play all the time, nor most of it. You'll have your work to do, and I'll have to be done first. And it'll have to be done first. Anne's cup of happiness was full, and Matthew caused it to overflow. He had just got home from a trip to the store at Carmody, and he sheepishly produced a small parcel from his pocket and handed it to Anne, with a deprecatory look at Marilla. Deprecatory? Deprecatory. With a deprecatory look at Marilla. I heard you say you liked chocolate sweeties, so I got you some, he said. Humph, sniffed Marilla. It'll ruin her teeth and stomach. There, there, child, don't look so dismal. You can eat those since Matthew has gone and got them. He'd better have brought you peppermints. They're wholesomer. Don't sicken yourself eating them all at once now. Oh, no. Indeed I won't, said Anne eagerly. I'll just eat one tonight, Marilla, and I can give Diana half of them, can't I? The other half will taste twice as sweet to me if I give some to her. It's delightful to think of that I have something. It's delightful to think I have something to give her. I will say it for the child, said Marilla, when Anne had gone to her gable. She isn't stingy. I'm glad for all faults. I detest stinginess in a child. Dear me, it's only 3 weeks since she came, and it seems as if she'd been here always. I can't imagine the place without her. Now, don't be looking I told you so, Matthew. That's bad enough in a woman, but it isn't to be endured in a man. I'm perfectly willing to own up that I'm glad I consented to keep the child, and that I'm getting fond of her. But don't you rub it in, Matthew Cuthbert. For those of you that weren't here at the beginning, Matthew and Marilla are a pair of, I guess, spinsters. Matthew and Marilla never married. They're brother and sister, and they live in their family home. Right, Urban Dictionary, help. Help me, Urban Dictionary, save me. Save me, Mr. Wizard, help. Yes. Yeah. Oh my goodness. We have time, I think, for one more chapter before the brakes are gonna fall off the vehicle, and I'm gonna have to run an ad. But we're almost there. So I'll read chapter 13, do a quick ad break, and then I will read 2 more chapters after that and see where we are, and maybe a 3rd chapter, depending. I'm trying to only do about 5 just to make the book last, but since I've only been reading like one day a week instead of 3, I'm not going through books quite as fast. Incidentally, I'm thinking about putting up a poll of something on Twitter, so that way I can find out what types of books or have more suggested books to do. I have a small assortment of different books. I was looking at Elizabeth Browning for poetry today, Robert Frost today. I have an assortment of classic children's stories, Hansel and Gretel, Snow White, Cinderella, Robin Hood's The Sleeping Beauty. Hi, Darth. Welcome in. Just an assortment. The Jungle Book would be good. Court of King Arthur. Just all kinds of things. I might do some poetry by, gosh, what was their name? I have a lot, and there's a lot of things available. Yep, Arthur would be good. The classic of King Arthur, I think, would be good. I'm not sure if like Tales of Earthsea, that was written a really long time ago. That might also be copyright free. I try to stay away from anything that's more modern literature. One, because of, copyright infringement, and I want to make sure I don't get my hand slapped. And two, I feel like if we don't revisit classics, if we just let them fade from memory, the lessons that can be learned and the knowledge of the time and the place also disappears. Is that good and bad? It can be. I think there has been some very, for me, very cringe moments. Oh, thank you, ASMR Safe Place. The orphanage didn't get the word wrong. Basically, Marilla and Matthew told the daughter of their friend, and she got the information wrong to the woman that went to pick up the children from the asylum. But yes, I was not aware that Matthew was ever married. That's fair. That's fair. Also, welcome in ASMR Safe Place. Do you prefer like ASMR, safe place, the whole word? What would you prefer to go by? Bree. Okay. Bree. Okay. I will remember. Well, welcome in, Bree. Yeah, pretty bold of Matthew to be married when he is terrified of women, and he's even more terrified of young girls. So the fact that he gets along with it really does have a couple of misspellings, or it could have been not a misspelling. It could have been the way that word was spelled in 1907. As time and words evolve, they constantly change. But it's fascinating. I digress. Let's go ahead and read one more, and then we can go on a quick ad break, use the restroom, come back, and read a couple more chapters. And thank you. Thank you for getting that information for me about Matthew. I appreciate it. All right. Chapter 13. The the delights of anticipation. Just num 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 num. Such a great, the way she writes is delicious. It's time Anne was in to do her sewing, said Marilla, glancing at the clock and then out into the yellow August afternoon where everything drowsed in the heat. She stayed playing with Diana more than half an hour more than I gave her leave to, and now she perched out there on the woodpile talking to Matthew, 19 to the dozen, when she knows perfectly well that she ought to be at her work. Oh, I'm sorry that would have been really cool to see. Um, I do want to go back to Nova Scotia, and I do want to see the Green Gables up there. I've heard it's beautiful, and there's a garden, and there's like a home up there that is dedicated to the story of Anne of Green Gables and Lucy Montgomery. It's something that I haven't done. Last time I went to Nova Scotia, I did visit the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic, which, if you ever get to go to Halifax, amazing museum full of all of these cool artifacts from the Titanic when it went down. Because when it went down, the flotsam from the boat washed ashore in Nova Scotia, and so there's a whole graveyard dedicated to the washed up souls from that boat, as well as like parts of like the chairs, the railings, some of the wooden bits from the boat that washed ashore. It's really cool. Um, Also, there's the Maud Lewis Art Gallery there, which is another famous Canadian artist. I don't know. There's a movie about her called Maudie. Maud. So this is Maud Lewis here in her tiny little house, which is in the museum, by the way. This incredibly tiny little house that has a doorway that's only about 5 feet. I had to duck my head to look inside. Is inside of the museum. Um, Her story is a really sad one, but she was just a really fascinating lady. And like her artwork is this like beautiful, kind of very simple style. Um, Her earlier artwork before her the progression of her disease, like the muscular dystrophy, like over time, her ability to draw and everything got really simple. She actually had stencils and templates that she would be able to paint in the lines. This is a good picture of her. But she painted on every surface of this house, every shingle, every window, inside on the walls, on the tables, on the door, on everything. She brought such beauty and light to everything that she touched. And her early life was really, really hard. And it did get better over time as she became more and more famous and her artwork got sold more and more broadly. But back then, she was selling a painting for like a quarter. And well, in today's economy, a quarter didn't get you very far. But her husband, he was kind of an all-around everything man. He sold fish, he picked up trash on the road or from people's homes, he repurposed things, repaired things, sold them. Um, and they had basically lived in a 2-room, like an attic and over a main floor house. And she was originally like they would sleep upstairs, but as her degeneration progressed, they actually set up her bed by the window so that way she could just sit up and paint all day until she couldn't anymore, and then she could rest right there and didn't have to be moved. And he would cook for her and take her to the bathroom, and it was really hard. Really hard story. Yeah, but if you get a chance, check out, I think it's called Maudie.
Drink water.
Yep, Maudie.
Become.
Came out in 2016. It has Sally Hawkins playing Maud Lewis, and then Ethan Hawke is her husband. It's beautiful. It's tragic. It says everything about her life. You can, I think, find it in a couple places. It's on YouTube. It's on Prime. Yeah, it's intense. It was on Netflix for a minute. I don't think it is anymore. Anyway, I digress. Where was I? I get so tangential sometimes. Yes. Okay. And now she's perched out there on the woodpile talking. Oh, don't worry about it, Bree. It's okay. Talking to Matthew, 19 to the dozen when she knows perfectly well that she ought to be at her work. And of course, he's listening to her like a perfect ninny. I never saw such an infatuated man. The more she talks and the odder the things she says, the more he's delighted, evidently. Anne Shirley, you come right in here this minute. Do you hear me? A series of staccato taps on the west window brought Anne flying in from the yard, eyes shining, cheeks faintly flushed with pink, unbraided hair streaming behind her in a torrent of brightness. Just so that you're aware, she was a redhead. "Oh, Marilla," she exclaimed breathlessly, "there's going to be a Sunday school picnic next week in Mr. Harmon Andrews' field, right near the Lake of Shining Waters. And Mrs. Superintendent Bell and Mrs. Rachel Lynde are going to make ice cream. Think of it, Marilla, ice cream! And oh, Marilla, can I go to it?" Just look at the clock, if you please, Anne. What time did I tell you to come in? 2 o'clock, but isn't it splendid about the picnic, Marilla? Please, can I go? Oh, I've never been to a picnic. I've dreamed of picnics, but I've never... Yes, I told you to come at 2 o'clock, and it's 2:45. I'd like to know why you didn't obey me, Anne. Why, I meant to. Marilla, as much as could be, but you have no idea how fascinating Idlewild? Yeah. How fascinating Idlewild is. And then, of course, I had to tell Matthew about the picnic. Matthew is such a sympathetic listener. Please, can I go? You'll have to learn to resist the fascination of idle whatever you call it. When I tell you to come in at a certain time, I mean that time and not a half an hour later. And you needn't stop to discourse with sympathetic listeners on your way either. As for the picnic, of course you can go. You're a Sunday school scholar, and it's not likely I'd refuse to let you go when all the other little girls are going. But, faltered Anne, Diana says that everybody must take a basket of things to eat. I can't cook, as you know, Marilla, and I don't mind going to a picnic without puffed sleeves so much, but I'd feel terribly humiliated if I had to go without a basket. It's been preying on my mind ever since Diana told me. Well, it needn't prey any longer. I'll bake you a basket. Oh, you dear good Marilla. Oh, you are so kind to me. Oh, I'm so much obliged to you. Getting through with her O's, Anne cast herself into Marilla's arms and rapturously kissed her sallow cheek. It was the first time in her whole life that childish lips had voluntarily touched Marilla's face. Again, that sudden sensation of startling sweetness thrilled her. She was secretly vastly pleased at Anne's impulsive caress, which was probably the reason why she said brusquely, "There, there, never mind your kissing nonsense. I'd sooner see you doing strictly as you're told. As for cooking, I mean to begin giving you lessons in that some of these days." But you're so feather-brained, Anne. I've been waiting to see if you'd sober down a little and learn to be steady before I begin. You've got to keep your wits about you in cooking and not stop in the middle of things to let your thoughts rove over all creation. Now, get out your patchwork and have your square done before tea time. This is the most solid life advice. Please, if you are cooking or baking anything, for love of all creation, pay attention to what you're doing. I have had a roommate that literally just she could burn boiling spaghetti on the stove. She would just walk away and let the water fully evaporate and then burn the spaghetti noodles. It was not, she just too absent-minded. And like, I get absent-minded too, but I take steps. I prep all of the ingredients in like all of their separate little bowls and cups and plates, set them aside, and then set them in order. Like, okay, I need to cook the chicken first. Okay, so cooked, set that aside. Okay, and now I need to brown my morpois, through my onions in and my carrots in and then my celery, and then, set that aside, and then do some aromatics like scallions and garlic and whatever else, and do everything in order, and then assemble. And don't walk away from anything that's on fire. It's just a bad idea. Every time I have to put something in the oven, I have to set little like timer reminders to myself on my phone. So I'll go back and check, or else I'll forget, because the timer on the oven will go off, but if that's on the other side of the house for me, I'm not going to hear it. Anyway, someday, cooking stream, who knows? I don't know. We'll see. I do not like patchwork, said Anne dolefully, hunting out her work basket and sitting down before a little heap of red and white diamonds with a sigh. I think some kinds of sewing would be nice, but there's no scope for imagination in patchwork. You've clearly not seen some patches. It's just one little seam after another, and you never seem to be getting anywhere. But of course, I'd rather be Anne of Green Gables sewing patchwork than Anne of any other place with nothing to do but play. I wish time went as quick sewing patches as it does when I'm playing with Diana, though. Oh, we do have such elegant times, Marilla. I have to furnish most of the imagination, but I'm well able to do that. Diana is simply perfect in every other way. You know that little piece of land across the brook that runs up between our farm and Mr. Barry's? It belongs to Mr. William Bell, and right in the corner there is a little ring of white birch trees, the most romantic spot, Marilla. Diana and I have our playhouse there. We call it Idlewild. Isn't that a poetical name? I assure you, it took me some time to think it out. I stayed awake nearly a whole night before I invented it. Then, just as I was dropping off to sleep, it came like an inspiration. We have got our house fixed up elegantly. You must come and see it, Marilla. Won't you? We have great big stones all covered with moss for seats and boards from tree to tree for shelves. And we have all our dishes on them. Of course, they're all broken, but it's the easiest thing in the world to imagine that they are whole. There's a piece of plate with a spray of red and yellow ivy on it that is especially beautiful. We keep it in the parlor, and we have the fairy glass there, too. The fairy glass is as lovely as a dream. Diana found it out in the woods behind their chicken house. It's all full of rainbows, just like young rainbows that haven't grown big yet. And Diana's mother told her it was broken off a hanging lamp they once had. But it's nicer to imagine the fairies lost it one night when they had a ball. So we call it the fairy glass. Matthew is going to make us a table. Oh, we have named that little round pool over in Mr. Barry's field Willowmere. I got the name out of the book Diana lent me. That was a thrilling book, Marilla. The heroine had 5 lovers. I'd be satisfied with one, wouldn't you? This is an 11-year-old girl, mind you. Oh, my goodness. She was very handsome, and she went through great tribulations. She could faint as easy as anything. I'd love to be able to faint, wouldn't you, Marilla? It's so romantic, but I'm really very healthy for all I'm so thin. I believe I'm getting fatter, though. Don't you think I am? I look at my elbows every morning when I get up to see if any dimples are coming. Diana is having a new dress made with elbow sleeves. She is going to wear it to the picnic. Oh, I do hope it will be fine next Wednesday. I don't feel that I could endure the disappointment if anything happened to prevent me from getting to the picnic. I suppose I'd live through it, but I'm certain it would be a lifelong sorrow. It wouldn't matter if I got to 100 picnics in after years. They wouldn't make up for missing this one. They're going to have boats on the lake of shining waters, and ice cream, as I told you. I have never tasted ice cream. Diana tried to explain what it was like, but I guess ice cream is one of those things that are beyond imagination. Anne, you have talked even on for 10 minutes by the clock, said Marilla. Now, just for curiosity's sake, see if you could hold your tongue for the same length of time. Oh, harsh, Marilla. Anne held her tongue as desired. But for the rest of the week she talked picnic and thought picnic and dreamed picnic. On Saturday it rained, and she worked herself up into such a frantic state lest it should keep on raining until, and over Wednesday, that Marilla made her sew an extra patchwork square by way of steadying her nerves. On Sunday, Anne confided to Marilla on the way home from church that she grew actually cold all over with excitement when the minister announced the picnic from the pulpit. Such a thrill as went up and down my back, Marilla. I don't think I'd ever really believed until then that there was honestly going to be a picnic. I couldn't help fearing I'd only imagined it. But when a minister says a thing in the pulpit, you just have to believe it. You set your heart too much on things, Anne, said Marilla with a sigh. I'm afraid there'll be a great many disappointments in store for you through life. Oh, Marilla, looking forward to things is half the pleasure of them, exclaimed Anne. True. Oh, this word. You may not. I'm going to just say may not. You may not get the things themselves, but nothing can prevent you from having the fun of looking forward to them. Mrs. Lynde says, "Blessed are they who expect nothing, for they shall not be disappointed." But I think it would be worse to expect nothing than to be disappointed. As an aside, I'm going to continue to say this to myself, but I think it's a good word, a good phrase to remember. Comparison is the thief of joy. So if you wish for things, want things, and you achieve your goals and your wants and needs are being met, find your joy. If you compare yourself to others, if you think and with envy and greed and want for something more than what you've achieved, you lose the joy in the accomplishments that you've made. So I see other people's successes, and it's hard because you want to be on their level, you want to be their peer, and even if you're not in your perceived mind on their level, you're still doing so much. So find your joy. Do the things that make you happy, share them with others, and find delight and joy in doing the thing. And don't compare yourself to others and their accomplishments, because it'll only take away from what you have done and the anticipation of what more you can do. Find joy in what you've done and what you can do. Do not compare yourself to others. So, anyway, that's not really it's like a non-segue there, but anyway. Marilla wore her amethyst brooch to church that day as usual. Marilla always wore her amethyst brooch to church. She always wore her amethyst brooch to church. She would have thought it rather sacrilegious to leave it off, as bad as forgetting her Bible or her collection dime. That amethyst brooch was Marilla's most treasured possession. A seafaring uncle had given it to her mother, who in turn had bequeathed it to Marilla. It was an old-fashioned oval, containing a braid of her mother's hair, surrounded by a border of very fine amethysts. Marilla knew too little about precious stones to realize how fine the amethysts actually were, but she thought them very beautiful and was always pleasantly conscious of their violet shimmer at her throat, above her good brown satin dress, even although she could not see it. Anne had been smitten with delighted admiration when she first saw that brooch. "Oh, Marilla, it's a perfectly elegant brooch. I don't know how you can pay attention to the sermon or the prayers when you have it on. I couldn't. I know. I think amethysts are just sweet. They are what I used to think diamonds were like. Long ago, before I had ever seen a diamond, I read about them and I tried to imagine what they would be like. I thought they would be lovely, glimmering purple stones. When I saw a real diamond in a lady's ring one day, I was so disappointed I cried. Of course, it was very lovely, but it isn't my idea of a diamond." Will you let me hold the brooch for 1 minute, Marilla? Do you think amethysts can be the souls of good violets? The imagination of this child. Oh my goodness. So colorful and whimsical and delightful. Okay, so here we are. We are on, so the next chapter will be chapter 14. Let me take a short break real quick. I'm going to go use the restroom, and we'll do a 3-minute ad. And then when I come back, we'll continue. We'll read at least 2 more chapters today, and then we'll see where we are after that. So hang tight. Thank you for sticking around, and I appreciate you hanging out while I go through some ads. Be right back. And I have returned, victorious in the war. Gave away a couple of subs because I realized one, my subscriber count has dropped down to below 30, unfortunately. And two, see if I can put one up on Hikara. Also, I don't know if Bone Caller is watching right now, but those 1 a.m. streams for me make it very hard to like be present and able to gift subs away. So, by gum, I think she's got it. Okay. Also, I think I fixed up the hydrate. Should work now. Let me test it real quick.
Drink water. Become moist.
Yep. Okay. I think we're good now. And I will do as it is telling me and drink a bit. All right. So, sugar tea, energy, water. I'm good to go. As a friendly reminder to all of you lovely Librophiles, be sure you're taking care of yourselves. Get up and stretch. Make sure you're hydrating, caffeinating. Grab yourself a little snack. Speaking of which, give that a little test.
Snack time!
I love it so much. Oh, man. Okay. So be sure to grab yourselves a snack, do whatever you need to do to settle in and enjoy the story. We shall read 2 more chapters today, and then I will talk about what's going on Friday, which is a bit of a departure for me. So yeah, stick around, and thank you for listening. Okay. We are on chapter 14, Anne's Confession. Bum bum bum. Also, I completely walked away.
I need more caffeine. My blood is not thin enough.
You got it. You got it, Bree. Absolutely. Okay. Anne's Confession. On the Monday evening before the picnic, Marilla came down from her room with a troubled face. Anne, she said to that small personage who was shelling peas by the spotless table and singing Nellie of the Hazel Dell with a vigor and expression that did credit to Diana's teaching. Did you see anything of my amethyst brooch? I thought I stuck it in my pincushion when I came home from church yesterday evening, but I can't find it anywhere. Read Harry Potter the series? I did, as it was coming out. It's been quite some time, though. That was... oh, gosh. 16 years ago? Quite some time. I saw it this afternoon when you were away at the Aid Society, said Anne, a little slowly. I was passing your door when I saw it on the cushion, so I went in to look at it. Did you touch it? Said Marilla sternly. Yes, admitted Anne. I took it up and I pinned it on my breast, just to see how it would look. You had no business to do anything of the sort. It's very wrong in a little girl to meddle. You shouldn't have gone into my room in the first place, and you shouldn't have touched a brooch that didn't belong to you in the second. Where did you put it? Oh, I put it back on the bureau. I had not it on, that sentence. I hadn't it on a minute. Truly, I didn't mean to meddle, Marilla. I didn't think about its being wrong to go in and try on the brooch. But I see now that it was, and I'll never do it again. That's one good thing about me. I never do the same naughty thing twice. You didn't put it back. That brooch isn't anywhere on the bureau. You've taken it out or something, Anne. I did put it back, said Anne quickly. Pertly, Marilla thought. I don't just remember whether I stuck it on the pincushion or laid it in the china tray, but I'm perfectly certain I put it back. I'll go and have another look, said Marilla, determining to be just. If you put that brooch back, it's there still. If it isn't, I'll know you didn't, and that's all. Marilla went to her room and made a thorough search, not only over the bureau, but in every other place she thought the brooch might possibly be. It was not to be found, and she returned to the kitchen. Anne, the brooch is gone. By your own admission, you were the last person to handle it. Now, what have you done with it? Tell me the truth at once. Did you take it out and lose it? No, I didn't, said Anne solemnly, meeting Marilla's angry gaze squarely. I never took the brooch out of your room, and that is the truth. If I was to be led to the block for it, although I'm not very certain what a block is. So there, Marilla. Anna's "so there" was only intended to emphasize her assertion, but Marilla took it as a display of defiance. I believe you are telling me a falsehood, Anne, she said sharply. I know you are. There now. Don't say anything more unless you are prepared to tell the whole truth. Go to your room and stay there until you are ready to confess. Will I take the peas with me? Said Anne meekly. No, I'll finish shelling them myself. Do as I bid you. When Anne had gone, Marilla went about her evening tasks in a very disturbed state of mind. She was worried about her valuable brooch. What if Anne had lost it? And how wicked of the child to deny having taken it when anybody could see she must have. With such an innocent face, too. I don't know what I wouldn't sooner have had happen, thought Marilla as she nervously shelled the peas. Of course, I don't suppose she meant to steal it or anything like that. She's just taken it to play with or help along that imagination of hers. She must have taken it, that's clear, for there hasn't been a soul in that room since she was in it, by her own story, until I went up tonight. And the brooch is gone. There's nothing surer. I suppose she has lost it and is afraid to own up for fear she'll be punished. It's a dreadful thing to think she tells falsehoods. It's a far worse thing than her fit of temper. It's a fearful responsibility to have a child in your house you can't trust. Slyness and untruthfulness, that's what she has displayed. I declare I feel worse about that than about the brooch. If she'd only have told the truth about it, I wouldn't mind so much. Do you have the complete collection of this book? I don't, but I'm reading from the Library of Congress, and I'm sure that they do. Almost anything that is from like the 1900s I can find pretty easily from the library. And if not there, then there's a number of other associated libraries that will have the book. Marilla went to her room at intervals through the evening and searched for the brooch without finding it. A bedtime visit to the east gable produced no result. Anne persisted in denying that she knew anything about the brooch, but Marilla was only the more firmly convinced that she did. She told Matthew the story the next morning. Matthew was confounded and puzzled. He could not so quickly lose faith in Anne, but he had to admit that circumstances were against her. You sure it hasn't fell down behind the bureau? Was the only suggestion he could offer. I've moved the bureau, and I've taken out the drawers, and I've looked in every crack and cranny, was Marilla's positive answer. The brooch is gone, and that child has taken it and lied about it. That's the plain, ugly truth, Matthew Cuthbert, and we might as well look it in the face. Well now, what are you going to do about it? Matthew asked, forlornly, feeling secretly thankful that Marilla had not he had to deal with the situation. He felt no desire to put his oar in this time. She'll stay in her room until she confesses, said Marilla grimly, remembering the success of this method in the former case. Then we'll see. Perhaps we'll be able to find the brooch if she'll only tell where she took it. But in any case, She'll have to be severely punished, Matthew. Well, now, you'll have to punish her, said Matthew, reaching for his hat. I've nothing to do with it, remember. You warned me off yourself. Marilla felt deserted by everyone. She could not even go to Mrs. Lynde for advice. She went up to the east gable with a very serious face and left it with a face more serious still. Anne steadfastly refused to confess. She persisted in asserting that she had not taken the brooch. The child has evidently been crying, and Marilla felt a pang of pity, which she sternly repressed. By night she was, as she expressed it, beat out. You'll stay in this room until you confess, Anne. You can make up your mind to that. She said firmly. But the picnic is tomorrow, Marilla, cried Anne. You won't keep me from going to that, will you? You'll just let me out for the afternoon, won't you? Then I'll stay here as long as you like afterwards, cheerfully, but I must go to the picnic. You'll not go to picnics nor anywhere else until you've confessed, Anne. Oh, Marilla, gasped Anne, but Marilla had gone out and shut the door. Wednesday morning dawned as bright and fair as if expressly made to order for the picnic. Birds sang around Green Gables. The Madonna lilies in the garden sent out whiffs of perfume that entered in on viewless winds at every door and window, and wandered through halls and rooms like spirits of benediction. The birches in the hollow waved joyful hands as if watching for Anne's usual morning greeting from the east gable. But Anne was not at her window. When Marilla took her breakfast up to her, she found the child sitting primly on her bed, pale and resolute, with tight-shut lips and gleaming eyes. Marilla, I'm ready to confess. Ah! Marilla laid down her tray. Once again her method had succeeded, but her success was very bitter to her. Let me hear what you have to say then, Anne. I took the amethyst brooch, said Anne, as if repeating a lesson she had learned. I took it just as you said. I didn't mean to take it when I went in, but it did look so beautiful, Marilla, when I pinned it on my breast, that I was overcome by an irresistible temptation. I imagined how perfectly thrilling it would be to take it to Idlewild and play I was the Lady Cordelia Fitzgerald. It would be so much easier to imagine I was the Lady Cordelia if I had a real amethyst brooch on. Diana and I made necklaces of roseberries, but what are roseberries compared to amethyst? So I took the brooch. I thought I could put it back before you came home. I went all the way around by the road to lengthen out the time. When I was going over the bridge across the lake of shining waters, I took the brooch off to have another look at it. Oh, how it did shine in the sunlight. And then, when I was leaning over the bridge, it just slipped through my fingers. So, and went down, 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 all purply sparkling, and sank forevermore beneath the lake of shining waters. And that's the best I can do at confessing, Marilla. Marilla felt hot anger surge up into her heart again. This child had taken and lost her treasured amethyst brooch, and now sat there calmly reciting the details thereof without the least apparent compunction or repentance. Anne, this is terrible, she said, trying to speak calmly. You are the very wickedest girl I ever heard of. Yes, I suppose I am, agreed Anne tranquilly. And I know I'll have to be punished. It'll be your duty to punish me, Marilla. Won't you please get it over right off, because I'd like to go to the picnic with nothing on my mind. Picnic, indeed. You'll go to no picnic today, Anne Shirley. That shall be your punishment, and it isn't half severe enough either for what you've done. Not go to the picnic? Anne sprang to her feet and clutched Marilla's hand. But you promised me I might. Oh, Marilla, I must go to the picnic. That was why I confessed. Punish me any way you like but that. Oh, Marilla, please, please let me go to the picnic. Think of the ice cream. For anything you know, I may never have a chance to taste ice cream again. Marilla disengaged Anne's clinging hands stonily. You needn't plead, Anne. You are not going to the picnic, and that is final. No, not a word. Anne realized that Marilla was not to be moved. She clasped her hands together, gave a piercing shriek, and then flung herself face downward on the bed, crying and writhing in utter abandonment of disappointment and despair. "For the land's sake," gasped Marilla, hastening from the room, "I believe the child is crazy. No child in her senses would behave as she does. If she isn't, she's utterly bad. Oh dear, I'm afraid Rachel was right from the first, but I've put my hand to the plow and I won't look back." That was a dismal morning. Marilla worked fiercely and scrubbed the porch floor and the dairy shelves when she could find nothing else to do. Neither the shelves nor the porch needed it, but Marilla did. Then she went out and raked the yard. When dinner was ready, she went to the stairs and called Anne. A tear-stained face appeared, looking tragically over the banisters. "Come down to your dinner, Anne." "I don't want any dinner, Marilla," said Anne sobbingly. "I couldn't eat anything. My heart is broken. You'll feel remorse of conscience some day, I expect, for breaking it, Marilla, but I forgive you. Remember when the time comes that I forgive you. But please don't ask me to eat anything, especially boiled pork and greens. Boiled pork and greens are so unromantic when one is in affliction." Exasperated, Marilla returned to the kitchen and poured out her tale of woe to Matthew, who, between his sense of justice and his unlawful sympathy with Anne, was a miserable man. "Well, now, she shouldn't have taken the brooch, Marilla, or told stories about it," he admitted, mournfully surveying his plateful of unromantic pork and greens, as if he, like Anne, thought it a food unsuited to crises of feeling. "But she's such a little thing, such an interesting little thing. Don't you think it's pretty rough not to let her go to the picnic when she's so set on it?" "Matthew Cuthbert, I'm amazed at you. I think I've let her off entirely too easy, and she doesn't appear to realize how wicked she's been at all. That's what worries me most. If she'd really felt sorry, it wouldn't be so bad. And you don't seem to realize it neither. You're making excuses for her all the time to yourself. I can see that." "Well, now, she's such a little thing," feebly reiterated Matthew, "and there should be allowances made, Marilla. You know she's never had any bringing up." "Well, she's having it now," retorted Marilla. The retort silenced Matthew. If it did not convince him, the dinner was a very dismal meal. The only cheerful thing about it was Jerry Buote, the hired boy, and Marilla resented his cheerfulness as a personal insult. When her dishes were washed and her bread sponge set and her hens fed, Marilla remembered that she had noticed a small rent in her best black lace shawl when she had taken it off on Monday afternoon on returning from the Ladies' Aid. She would go and mend it. The shawl was in a box in her trunk. As Marilla lifted it out, the sunlight falling through the vines that clustered thickly about the window struck upon something caught in the shawl, something that glittered and sparkled in facets of violet light. Marilla snatched at it with a gasp. It was the amethyst brooch hanging to a thread of the lace by its catch. "Dear life and heart," said Marilla blankly, "what does this mean? Here's my brooch, safe and sound, that I thought was at the bottom of Barry's pond. Whatever did that girl mean by saying she took it and lost it? I declare I believe Green Gables is bewitched. I remember now that when I took off my shawl Monday afternoon I laid it on the bureau for a minute. I suppose the brooch got caught in it somehow. Well." Marilla betook herself to the east gable, brooch in hand. Anne had cried herself out and was sitting dejectedly by the window. "Anne Shirley," said Marilla solemnly, "I've just found my brooch hanging to my black lace shawl. Now I want to know what the rigmarole you told me this morning meant." "Why, you said you'd keep me here until I confessed," returned Anne wearily, "and so I decided to confess because I was bound to get to the picnic. I thought out a confession last night after I went to bed and made it as interesting as I could, and I said it over and over so that I wouldn't forget it. But you wouldn't let me go to the picnic after all, so all my trouble was wasted." Marilla had to laugh, in spite of herself, but her conscience pricked her. Anne, you do beat all, but I was wrong. I see that now. I shouldn't have doubted your word when I'd never known you to tell a story. Of course, it wasn't right for you to confess to a thing you hadn't done. It was very wrong to do so. But I drove you to it. So if you'll forgive me, Anne, I'll forgive you and we'll start square again. And now get yourself ready for the picnic. Anne flew up like a rocket. Oh, Marilla, isn't it too late? No, it's only 2 o'clock. They won't be more than well gathered yet, and it'll be an hour before they have tea. Wash your face and comb your hair and put on your gingham. I'll fill a basket for you. There's plenty of stuff baked in the house, and I'll get Jerry to hitch up the sorrel and drive you down to the picnic ground. Oh, Marilla, exclaimed Anne, flying to the washstand. 5 minutes ago I was so miserable I was wishing I'd never been born, and now I wouldn't change places with an angel. That night, a thoroughly happy, completely tired out Anne returned to Green Gables in a state of beautification impossible to describe. Oh, Marilla, I've had a perfectly scrumptious time. Scrumptious is a new word I learned today. I heard Mary Alice Bell use it. Isn't it very expressive? Everything was lovely. We had a splendid tea, and then Mr. Harmon Andrews took us all for a row on the Lake of Shining Waters. 6 of us at a time, and Jane Andrews nearly fell overboard. She was leaning out to pick water lilies, and if Mr. Andrews hadn't caught her by her sash, caught her by her sash just in the nick of time, she'd have fallen in and probably been drowned. This kid. It would be such a thrilling tale to tell, and we had the ice cream. Words fail me to describe that ice cream. Marilla, I assure you it was sublime. That evening Marilla told the whole story to Matthew over her stocking basket. I'm willing to own up that I made a mistake, she concluded candidly, but I've learned a lesson. I have to laugh when I think of Anne's confession, although I suppose I shouldn't, for it really was a falsehood. But it doesn't seem as bad as the other would have been, somehow, and anyhow, I'm responsible for it. That child is hard to understand in some respects, but I believe she'll turn out all right. And there's one thing certain, no house will ever be dull that she's in. Aw, it was so cute. Oh, okay. Let's see what we have here. That would be chapter 15. We can end on 15. That would be 5 from today. Because we did 2 chapters, then 8 chapters, and now we're doing 5. I'm trying to find a median ground, and I think 5 seems to be a good number. Oh, it's been fun reading today. I'm like I've had my ups and downs just because I've had some anxiety, and like real life work related stuff has kept me pretty busy, but not so bad. All right, quick hydration, and then we'll read one more chapter, and that'll take us to a little bit, maybe 20 past the hour, I think, on average for these chapters. And then I might have to go out and get myself some ice cream. The way she sublimely described it, it sounds so delightful. Okay, we are on to chapter 15. The Tempest in the School Teapot. What a title. What a splendid day, said Anne, drawing a long breath. Isn't it good just to be alive on a day like this? I pity the people who aren't born yet for missing it. They may have good days, of course, but they can never have this one. And it's splendider. Oh, that's that's gonna give me a stroke. And it's splendider. Ah, a horrible word. And it's splendider still to have such a lovely way to go to school by, isn't it? It's a lot nicer than going round by the road that is so dusty and hot, said Diana practically, peeping into her dinner basket and mentally calculating if the 3 juicy, toothsome raspberry tarts reposing there were divided among 10 girls, how many bites each girl would have. The little girls of Avonlea, Avonlea The little girls of Avonlea school always pooled their lunches, and to eat 3 raspberry tarts all alone, or even to share them only with one's best chum, would have forever and ever branded as awful mean the girl who did it. And yet, when the tarts were divided among 10 girls, you just got enough to tantalize you. The way Anne and Diana went to school was a pretty one. Anne thought those walks to and from school with Diana couldn't be improved upon even by imagination. Going around by the main road would have been so unromantic, but to go by Lover's Lane and Willowmere and Violet Vale and Birch Path was romantic, if ever anything was. Lover's Lane opened out below the orchard at Green Gables and stretched far up into the woods to the end of the Cuthbert farm. It was the way by which the cows were taken to the back pasture and the wood hauled home in winter. Anne had named it Lover's Lane before she had been a month at Green Gables. Not that lovers ever really walk there, she explained to Marilla, but Diana and I are reading a perfectly magnificent book, and there's a lover's lane in it. So we want to have one too. And it's a very pretty name, don't you think? So romantic. We can imagine the lovers into it, you know. I like that lane because you can think out loud there without people calling you crazy. I had a delivery today, so I have 3 ice cream choices. Oh, I'm so jealous. Yeah, I think I'll go down to the local ice creamery place. They have a birch syrup. Um, so it's like birch brittle, birch ice cream, and then birch syrup swirls in it. And so it's like crunchy and creamy and just full of birchness. It's so good. Anne, starting out alone in the morning, went down Lover's Lane as far as the brook. Here, Diana met her, and the 2 little girls went on up the lane under the leafy arch of maples. Maples are such sociable trees, said Anne. They're always rustling and whispering to you until they came to a rustic bridge. Then they left the lane and walked through Mr. Barry's back field and past Willowmere. Beyond Willowmere came Violet Vale, a little green dimple in the shadow of Mr. Andrew Bell's big woods. Of course, there are no violets there now, Anne told Marilla, but Diana says there are a million of them in the spring. Oh, Marilla, can't you just imagine you see them? It actually takes away my breath. I named it Violet Vale. Diana says she never saw the beat of me for hitting on fancy names for places. It's nice to be clever at something, isn't it? But Diana named the birch path. She wanted to, so I let her. But I'm sure I could have found something more poetical than plain birch path. Anybody can think of a name like that, but the birch path is one of the prettiest places in the world, Marilla. It was. Other people besides Anne thought so when they stumbled on it. It was a little narrow, twisting path, winding down over a long hill straight through Mr. Bell's woods. Where the light came down, sifted through so many emerald screens that it was as flawless as the heart of a diamond. It was fringed in all its length with slim young birches, white-stemmed and lissom boughed. Ferns and starflowers and wild lilies of the valley and scarlet tufts of pigeonberries grew thickly along it, and always there was a delightful spiciness in the air, and music of bird calls and the murmur and laugh of wood winds in the trees overhead. Now and then you might see a rabbit skipping across the road if you were quiet, which with Anne and Diana happened about once in a blue moon. Down in the valley the path came out to the main road, and then it was just up the spruce hill to the school. The Avonlea school was a whitewashed whitewashed building, low in the eaves and wide in the windows, furnished inside with comfortable, substantial, old-fashioned desks that opened and shut, and were carved all over their lids with the initials and hieroglyphics of 3 generations of school children. The schoolhouse was set back from the road. Behind it was a dusky fir wood and a brook where all the children put their bottles of milk in the morning to keep cool and sweet until dinner hour. Is dinner like lunch? I feel, and then like supper is like the evening meal, I'm guessing. That's interesting. Marilla had seen Anne start off to school on the first day of September with many secret misgivings. Anne was such an odd girl. How would she get on with the other children, and how on earth would she ever manage to hold her tongue during school hours? I feel you, Marilla. Yep. Things went better than Marilla feared, however. Anne came home that evening in high spirits. I think I'm going to like school here, she announced. I don't think much of the master, though. He's all the time curling his mustache and making eyes at Prissy Andrews. Prissy is grown up, you know. She's 16 and she's studying for the entrance examination into Queen's Academy at Charlottetown next year. All grown up at 16 years of age. Blah. The headmaster. Gross. Gross. Tilly Boulter says the master is dead gone on her. She's got a beautiful complexion and curly brown hair, and she does it up so elegantly. She sits in the long seat at the back, and he sits there too, most of the time, to explain her lessons, he says. Sus. But Ruby Gillis says she saw him writing something on her slate, and when Prissy read it, she blushed as red as a beet and giggled. And Ruby Gillis says she doesn't believe it had anything to do with the lesson. Anne Shirley, don't let me hear you talking about your teacher in that way again, said Marilla sharply. You don't go to school to criticize the master. I guess he can teach you something, and it's your business to learn. And I want you to understand right off that you are not to come home telling tales about him. That is something I won't encourage. I hope you were a good girl. Oh, Marilla. Indeed I was, said Anne comfortably. It wasn't so hard as you might imagine, either. I sit with Diana. Our seat is right by the window, and we can look down to the lake of shining waters. There are a lot of nice girls in school, and we had scrumptious fun playing at dinner time. It's so nice to have a lot of little girls to play with, but of course I like Diana best, and always will. I adore Diana. I'm dreadfully far behind the others. They're all in the fifth book, and I'm only in the fourth. I feel that it's kind of a disgrace, but there's not one of them has such an imagination as I have, and I soon found that out. We had reading and geography and Canadian history and dictation today. Mr. Phillips said my spelling was disgraceful, and he held up my slate so that everybody could see it, all marked over. I felt so mortified, Marilla. He might have been politer to a stranger, I think. Ruby Gillis gave me an apple, and Sophia Sloane lent me a lovely pink card with "May I see you home" on it. I'm to give it back to her tomorrow. And Tilly Boulter let me wear her bead ring all the afternoon. Can I have some of those pearl beads off the old pincushion in the garret to make myself a ring? And oh, Marilla, Jane Andrews told me that Minnie MacPherson told her that she heard Prissy Andrews tell Sarah Gillis that I had a very pretty nose. That sentence. Ooh, okay. Marilla, that is the first compliment I ever had in my life, and you can't imagine what a strange feeling it gave me. Marilla, have I really a pretty nose? I know you'll tell me the truth. Kids. Your nose is well enough, said Marilla shortly. Secretly, she thought Anne's nose was a remarkably pretty one, but she had no intention of telling her so. That was 3 weeks ago, and all had gone smoothly so far. And now, this crisp September morning, Anne and Diana were tripping blithely down the birch path, two of the happiest little girls in Avonlea. I guess Gilbert Blythe will be in school today, said Diana. He's been visiting his cousins over in New Brunswick all summer, and he only came home Saturday night. He's awfully handsome, Anne, and he teases the girls something terrible. He just torments our lives out. Diana's voice indicated that she'd rather liked having her life tormented out than not. Okay. Diana's voice indicated that she rather liked having her life tormented out than not. Gilbert Blythe, said Anne. Isn't it his name that's written up on the porch wall with Julia Bell's and a big "Take Notice" over them? Yes, said Diana, tossing her head. But I'm sure he doesn't like Julia Bell so very much. I've heard him say he studied the multiplication table by her freckles. Oh, don't speak about freckles to me, implored Anne. It isn't delicate when I've got so many. But I do think that writing take notices up on the wall about the boys and girls is the silliest ever. I should just like to see anybody dare to write my name up with a boy's. Not, of course, she hastened to add, that anybody would. Anne sighed. She didn't want her name written up, but it was a little humiliating to know that there was no danger of it. Nonsense, said Diana, whose black eyes and glossy tresses had played such havoc with the hearts of Avonlea schoolboys that her name figured on the porch walls in half a dozen take notices. It's only meant as a joke, and don't you be too sure your name won't ever be written up. Charlie Sloane is dead gone on you. He told his mother, mind you, that you were the smartest girl in school, and that's better than being good-looking. No, it isn't, said Anne, feminine to the core. I'd rather be pretty than clever, and I hate Charlie Sloane. I can't bear a boy with goggle eyes. If anyone wrote my name up with his, I'd never get over it, Diana Barry. But it is nice to keep head of your class. You'll have Gilbert in your class after this, said Diana, and he's used to being head of his class, I can tell you. He's only in the 4th book, although he's nearly 14. 4 years ago, his father was sick and had to go to Alberta for his health, and Gilbert went with him. They were there 3 years, and Gil didn't go to school hardly any until they came back. You won't find it so easy to keep head after this, Anne. I'm glad, said Anne quickly. I couldn't really feel proud of keeping head of little boys and girls of not just 9 or 10. I got up yesterday spelling ebullition. Ebullition? What is that? Ebullition. Okay. Is that a word? It is. It's definitely a word. Ebullition. Okay. Ebullition. Noun, a seething or overflowing as of passion or feeling outburst. The state of being ebullient. The act or process of boiling up. A rushing forth of water, lava, etc. in state of agitation. Seething or overflowing as passion or feeling. Interesting. I got up yesterday spelling ebullition. Josie Pye was head, and mind you, she peeped in her book. Mr. Phillips didn't see her. He was looking at Prissy Andrews, but I did. I just swept her a look of freezing scorn, and she got as red as a beet and spelled it wrong after all. Those Pye girls are cheats all round, said Diana indignantly, as they climbed the fence of the main road. Gertie Pye actually went and put her milk bottle in my place in the brook yesterday. Did you ever? I don't speak to her now. When Mr. Phillips was in the back of the room hearing Prissy Andrews' Latin, Diana whispered to Anne, "That's Gilbert Blythe sitting right across the aisle from you, Anne. Just look at him and see if you don't think he's handsome." Anne looked accordingly. She had a good chance to do so, for the said Gilbert Blythe was absorbed in stealthily pinning the long yellow braid of Ruby Gillis, who sat in front of him, to the back of her seat. This is one of those life lessons where when girls are taught that when boys like you, and it's like, oh, if he's pulling your hair, he's mean to you, it means he likes you, and this has set a terrible precedent. He was a tall boy, with curly brown hair, roguish hazel eyes, and a mouth twisted into a teasing smile. Presently, Ruby Gillis started up to take a sum to the master. She fell back into her seat with a little shriek, believing her hair was pulled out by the roots. Everybody looked at her, and Mr. Phillips glared so sternly that Ruby began to cry. Gilbert had whisked the pin out of sight and was studying his history with the soberest face in the world. But when the commotion subsided, he looked at Anne and winked with inexpressible drollery. "I think your Gilbert Blythe is handsome," confided Anne to Diana, "but I think he's very bold. It isn't good manners to wink at a strange girl." But it was not until the afternoon that things really began to happen. Mr. Phillips was back in the corner explaining a problem in algebra to Prissy Andrews, and the rest of the scholars were doing pretty much as they pleased, eating green apples, whispering, drawing pictures on their slates, and driving crickets, harnessed to strings, up and down the aisle. Gilbert Blythe was trying to make Anne Shirley look at him, and failing utterly, because Anne was at that moment totally oblivious, not only of the very existence of Gilbert Blythe, but of every other scholar in Avonlea School, and of Avonlea School itself, with her chin propped on her hands and her eyes fixed on the blue glimpse of the lake of shining waters that the west window afforded. She was far away in a gorgeous dreamland, hearing and seeing nothing save her own wonderful visions. Gilbert Blythe wasn't used to putting himself out to make a girl look at him and meeting with failure. She should look at him, that red-haired Shirley girl with the little pointed chin and the big eyes that weren't like the eyes of any other girl in Avonlea School. Gilbert reached across the aisle, picked up the end of Anne's long red braid, held it out at arm's length, and said in a piercing whisper, "Carrots! Carrots!" Then Anne looked at him with a vengeance. She did more than look. She sprang to her feet, her bright fancies fallen into cureless ruin. She flashed one indignant glance at Gilbert from eyes whose angry sparkle was swiftly quenched in equally angry tears. "You mean, hateful boy!" she exclaimed passionately. "How dare you!" And then, thwack! Anne had brought her slate down on Gilbert's head and cracked it, slate, not the head, clear across. Avonlea School always enjoyed a scene. This was an especially enjoyable one. Everybody said "ooh" in horrified delight. Diana gasped. Ruby Gillis, who was inclined to be hysterical, began to cry. Tommy Sloane let his team of crickets escape him altogether, while he stared open-mouthed at the tableau. Open-mouthed at the tableau. Mr. Phillips stalked down the aisle and laid his hand heavily on Anne's shoulder. "Anne Shirley, what does this mean?" he said angrily. Anne returned no answer. It was asking too much of flesh and blood to expect her to tell before the whole school that he had called her carrots. Gilbert it was who spoke up stoutly. "It was my fault, Mr. Phillips. I teased her." Mr. Phillips paid no heed to Gilbert. "I am sorry to see a pupil of mine displaying such a temper and such a vindictive spirit," he said in a solemn tone, as if the mere fact of being a pupil of his ought to root out all evil passions from the hearts of small, imperfect mortals. Anne, go and stand on the platform in front of the blackboard for the rest of the afternoon. Anne would have infinitely preferred a whipping to this punishment, under which her sensitive spirit quivered as from a whiplash. With a white, set face, she obeyed. Mr. Phillips took a chalk crayon and wrote on the blackboard above her head. Anne Shirley has a very bad temper. Anne Shirley must learn to control her temper. Mind you, he's spelling it wrong. Anne with an E, after all. Anne Shirley must learn to control her temper, and then read it out loud so that even the primer class, who couldn't read writing, should understand it. Anne stood there the rest of the afternoon with that legend above her. She did not cry or hang her head. Anger was still too hot in her heart for that, and it sustained her amid all her agony of humiliation. With resentful eyes and passion-red cheeks, she confronted alike Diana's sympathetic gaze and Charlie Sloane's indignant nods and Josie Pye's malicious smiles. As for Gilbert Blythe, she would not even look at him. She would never look at him again. She would never speak to him. Also, welcome in, Tiger Faye. Also, for those of you viewers that are here and haven't checked out their channel already, Tiger just hit 500 and I'm so happy and I'm so excited for them. I digress. If you haven't checked out their channel, I would. They're a variety streamer, amazing artist. They have been working on some new backgrounds and new models. I think it was Doho. The Doho. They're working on their model right now, and it looks so good. With got a big bell on their collar and beautiful big bright eyes, and it looks amazing. Anyway, I got off track. So settle in, welcome in, Tiger Faye. Be sure to hydrate, caffeinate, grab a snack, do whatever it is you need to settle in. I appreciate having you here. When school was dismissed, Anne marched out with her red head held high. Gilbert Blythe tried to intercept her at the porch door. "I'm awfully sorry I made fun of your hair, Anne," he whispered contritely. "Honest I am. Don't be mad for keeps now." Anne swept by disdainfully, without look or sign of hearing. "Oh, how could you, Anne?" breathed Diana, as they walked down the road, half reproachfully, half admiringly. Diana felt that she could never have resisted Gilbert's plea. "I shall never forgive Gilbert Blythe," said Anne firmly, "and Mr. Phillips spelled my name without an E, too. The iron has entered into my soul, Diana." Diana hadn't the least idea what Anne meant, but she understood it was something terrible. "You mustn't mind Gilbert making fun of your hair," she said soothingly. "Why, he makes fun of all the girls. He laughs at mine because it's so black. He called me a crow a dozen times, and I never heard him apologize for anything before either." "There's a great deal of difference between being called a crow and being called carrots," said Anne with dignity. "Gilbert Blythe has hurt my feelings excruciatingly, Diana. It is possible the matter might have blown over without more excruciation if nothing else had happened, but when things begin to happen, they are apt to keep on." Avonlea scholars often spent a noon hour picking gum in Mr. Bell's spruce grove over the hill and across his big pasture field. "Oh, welcome in, Phaedra." "Oh, it's a whole party." Aw, thank you. Thank you for the follow. Welcome in, all of you wonderful raiders. Welcome in. Hi, I'm Vexen Cat. Welcome to my library. I am a retro tiger librarian. I read classic literature and poetry. I'm occasionally play games like D&D and Sea of Thieves. Feel free to take a moment to settle in. If you want to stick around, that's amazing. I am currently reading Anne of Green Gables, and this is, I believe, chapter 12? No. I've lost track. I think we're on chapter 15 now. Yep, we're on chapter 15. Okay. Okay. So we're on to chapter 15 of Anne of Green Gables. If this is your first time ever visiting, I appreciate you sticking around. Phaedra, thank you so much for the follow. Once again, feel free to stick around and check things out. I'm reading under ASMR today. I've been reading under Reading Fun. I'm trying to alternate and see like where I really fit in because the way I speak is rather soothing and relaxing and it's enjoyable, but I'm also sharing my love of literature with you, dear listeners, and Librophiles, which, if you're not familiar with the word, it means love of books or love of libraries. Um, yes, well, welcome in. Thank you so much for dropping in, and thank you so much for the raid. Can I get a shout out for Phaedra when somebody has a chance? Let's see here. All right, I've got it. Ta-da. Thank you.
It's fine, turtles. They grow it
Ooh,
back very
Minecraft.
quickly. No one. There's no harming of sheep here. Don't mind that I'm eating mutton. It's a prop mutton.
It's a prop mutton indeed. Oh, that's super cute. I love your model too. I don't, is that your current model, Phaedra? I like it. It's even if it's your old model, it was adorable, and whatever your new model is, were you reading before or were you playing a game before? Oh, maybe they stepped away. All right, let's get back to the book, shall we? Hmm. Okay. Yeah, okay. Avonlea scholars often spent noon hour picking gum in Mr. Bell's spruce grove over the hill and across his big pasture field. From there they could keep an eye on Eben Wright's house, where the master boarded. When they saw Mr. Phillips emerging therefrom, they ran for the schoolhouse. But the distance being about 3 times longer than Mr. Wright's lane, they were very apt to arrive there, breathless and gasping, some 3 minutes too late. On the following day, Mr. Phillips was seized with one of his spasmodic fits of reform and announced, before going home to dinner, that he should expect to find all the scholars in their seats when he returned. Anyone who came in late would be punished. All the boys and some of the girls went to Mr. Bell's spruce grove as usual, fully intending to stay only long enough to pick a chew. But spruce groves are seductive, and yellow nuts of gum beguiling. They picked and loitered and strayed, and as usual the first thing that recalled them to a sense of flight of time was Jimmy Glover shouting from the top of a patriarchal old spruce, "Master's coming!" The girls who were on the ground started first and managed to reach the schoolhouse in time, but without a second to spare. The boys who had to wriggle hastily down from the trees were later, and Anne, who had not been picking gum at all, but was wandering happily in the far end of the grove, waist deep among the bracken, singing softly to herself, with a wreath of rice lilies on her hair, as if she were some wild divinity of the shadowy places, was latest of all. Anne could run like a deer, however, run she did with the impish result that she overtook the boys at the door and was swept into the schoolhouse among them, just as Mr. Phillips was in the act of hanging up his hat. Mr. Phillips' brief reforming energy was over. He didn't want the bother of punishing a dozen pupils, but it was necessary to do something to save his word. So he looked about for a scapegoat and found it in Anne, who had dropped into her seat, gasping for breath, with her forgotten lily wreath hanging askew over one ear and giving her a particularly rakish and disheveled appearance. Anne Shirley, since you seem to be so fond of the boys' company, we shall indulge your taste for it this afternoon, he said sarcastically. Take those flowers out of your hair and sit with Gilbert Blythe. The other boys snickered. Diana, turning pale with pity, plucked the wreath from Anne's hair and squeezed her hand. Anne stared at the master as if turned to stone. Did you hear what I said, Anne? He queried Mr. Phillips sternly. Yes, sir, said Anne slowly, but I didn't suppose you really meant it. I assure you I did. Still, with the sarcastic inflection which all the children, and Anne especially, hated, it flicked on the raw. Obey me at once. For a moment Anne looked as if she meant to disobey. Then, realizing that there was no help for it, she rose haughtily, stepped across the aisle, sat down beside Gilbert Blythe, and buried her face in her arms on the desk. Ruby Gillis, who got a glimpse of it as it went down, told the others going home from school that she'd... that just grates. Okay. That she'd actually... Okay. Actually never seen anything like it. It was so white, with awful little red spots in it. To Anne, this was as the end of all things. It was bad enough to be singled out for punishment from among a dozen equally guilty ones. It was worse still to be sent to sit with a boy, but that boy should be Gilbert Blythe was heaping insult on injury to a degree unbearable. Anne felt that she could not bear it, and it would be of no use to try. Her whole being seized with shame and anger and humiliation. At first the other scholars looked and whispered and giggled and nudged. But as Anne never lifted her head, and as Gilbert worked fractions as if his whole soul was absorbed in them and them only, they soon returned to their own tasks, and Anne was forgotten. When Mr. Phillips called the history class out, Anne should have gone, but Anne did not move. And Mr. Phillips, who had been writing some verses to Priscilla before he called the class, was thinking about an obstinate rhyme still, and never missed her. Once, when nobody was looking, Gilbert took from his desk a little pink candy heart with a gold motto on it, "You are sweet," and slipped it under the curve of Anne's arm. Whereupon Anne arose, took the pink heart gingerly between the tips of her fingers, dropped it on the floor, ground it to powder beneath her heel, and resumed her position without deigning to bestow a glance on Gilbert. She's really taking that never going to forgive him to the absolute extreme. When school went out, Anne marched to her desk, ostentatiously took out everything therein, books and writing tablet, pen and ink, testament and arithmetic, and piled them neatly on her cracked slate. What are you taking all those things home for, Anne? Diana wanted to know as soon as they were out on the road. She had not dared to ask the question before. I am not coming back to school any more, said Anne. Diana gasped and stared at Anne to see if she meant it. Will Marilla let you stay home? She asked. She'll have to, said Anne. I'll never go to school to that man again. Oh, Anne, Diana looked as if she were ready to cry. I do think you're mean. What shall I do? Mr. Phillips will make me sit with that horrid Gertie Pye. I know he will because she is sitting alone. Do come back, Anne. I'd do almost anything in the world for you, Diana, said Anne sadly. I'd let myself be torn limb from limb if it would do you any good. But I can't do this. So please don't ask it. You harrow up my very soul. Just think of all the fun you will miss, mourned Diana. We are going to build the loveliest new house down by the brook, and we'll be playing ball next week, and you've never played ball, Anne. It's tremendously fun. God, it's so hard. It's tremendously exciting. And we're going to learn a new song. Jane Andrews is practicing it up now. And Alice Andrews is going to bring a new pansy book next week, and we're all going to read it out loud, chapter about down by the brook, and you know you are so fond of reading out loud, Anne. Nothing moved Anne in the least. Her mind was made up. She would not go to school to Mr. Phillips again. She told Marilla so when she got home. Nonsense, said Marilla. It isn't nonsense at all, said Anne, gazing at Marilla with solemn, reproachful eyes. Don't you understand, Marilla? I've been insulted. Insulted? Fiddlesticks! You'll go to school tomorrow as usual. Oh, no. Anne shook her head gently. I'm not going back, Marilla. I'll learn my lessons at home, and I'll be as good as I can be and hold my tongue all the time if it's possible at all. But I will not go back to school, I assure you. Marilla saw something remarkably like unyielding stubbornness looking out of Anne's small face. She understood that she would have trouble in overcoming it, but she resolved wisely to say nothing more just then. I'll run down and see Rachel about it this evening, she thought. There's no use reasoning with Anne now. She's too worked up, and I've an idea she can be awful stubborn if she takes the notion. A redhead stubborn? Never. Never at all. I don't know what you're talking about. She's too worked up, and I've an idea she can be awful stubborn if she takes the notion. Far as I can make out from her story, Mr. Phillips has been carrying matters with a rather high hand, but it would never do to say so to her. I'll just talk it over with Rachel. She sent 10 children to school, and she ought to know something about it. She'll have heard the whole story, too, by this time. Marilla found Mrs. Lynde knitting quilts as industriously and cheerfully as usual. I suppose you know what I've come about, she said, a little shamefacedly. Mrs. Rachel nodded. About Anne's fuss in school, I reckon, she said. Tilly Boulter was in on her way home from school and told me about it. I don't know what to do with her, said Marilla. She declares she won't go back to school. I never saw a child so worked up. I've been expecting trouble ever since she started to school. I knew things were going so too smooth to last. She's so high-strung. What would you advise, Rachel? Well, since you asked my advice, Marilla, said Mrs. Lynde amiably. Mrs. Lynde dearly loved to be asked for advice. I'll just humor her a little at first, that's what I do. It's my belief that Mr. Phillips was in the wrong. Of course, it doesn't do to say so to the children, you know, and of course he did right to punish her yesterday for giving way to temper. But today, it was different. The others who were late should have been punished as well as Anne, that's what. And I don't believe in making the girls sit with the boys for punishment. It isn't modest. Tilly Boulter was real indignant. She took Anne's part right through and said all the scholars did too. Anne seems real popular among them somehow, and I never thought she'd take with them so well. Then you really think I'd better let her stay home, said Marilla in amazement. Yes. That is, I wouldn't say school to her again until she said it herself. Depend upon it, Marilla. She'll call off in a week or so and be ready enough to go back on her own. Of her own accord, that's what. While if you were to make her go back right off, dear knows what freak or tantrum she'd take next, and make more trouble than ever. The less fuss made, the better, in my opinion. She won't miss much by not going to school as far as that goes. Mr. Phillips isn't any good at all as a teacher. The order he keeps is scandalous, that's what, and he neglects the young fry and puts all his time on those big scholars he's getting ready for Queen's. He'd never have got the school for another year if his uncle hadn't been a trustee. The trustee, for he just leads the other two around by the nose, that's what. I declare I don't know what education in this island is coming to. Mrs. Rachel shook her head, as much as to say if she were only at the head of the educational system of the province, things would be much better managed. Marilla took Mrs. Rachel's advice, and not another word was said to Anne about going back to school. She learned her lessons at home, did her chores, and played with Diana in the chilly purple autumn twilights. But when she met Gilbert Blythe on the road or encountered him in Sunday school, she passed him by with an icy contempt that was no whit thawed by his evident desire to appease her. Even Diana's efforts as a peacemaker were of no avail. Anne had evidently made up her mind to hate Gilbert Blythe to the end of life. As much as she hated Gilbert, however, did she love Diana. With all the love of her passionate little heart, equally intense in its likes and dislikes. One evening Marilla coming in from the orchard with a basket of apples, found Anne sitting alone by the east window in the twilight, crying bitterly. "Whatever's the matter now, Anne?" she asked. "It's about Diana," sobbed Anne luxuriously. "I love Diana so, Marilla. I cannot ever live without her, but I know very well when we grow up that Diana will get married and go away and leave me. And oh, what shall I do? I hate her husband. I just hate him furiously." The hypothetical future husband, I guess. Kids cry about some weird things. I've been imagining it all out, the wedding and everything, Diana dressed in snowy garments with a veil and looking as beautiful and regal as a queen, and me the bridesmaid with a lovely dress too and puffed sleeves, but with a breaking heart hid beneath my smiling face, and then bidding Diana goodbye. Here Anne broke down entirely and wept with increasing bitterness. Marilla turned quickly away to hide her twitching face. But it was no use. She collapsed on the nearest chair and burst into such a hearty and unusual peal of laughter that Matthew, crossing the yard outside, halted in amazement. When had he heard Marilla laugh like that before? "Well, Anne Shirley," said Marilla as soon as she could speak, "if you must borrow trouble, for pity's sake borrow it handier home. I should think you had an imagination, sure enough." She's just like, and I'm done. It's just, you're crying about a hypothetical future husband for your friend because she'll eventually get married. Just, oh man, kids, I'm telling you. The imagination of this beautiful little girl is hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. Okay. With that said, we are at chapter 16, which I think would be a good place to start. Next time, let's switch to da 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 da. Ta-da. Okay, so I switched over to the Just Chatting. We are going to be doing something a little bit different. Normally, I would try to read on Friday, but work and life has been kicking my butt. However, on Friday, as something a little bit of a departure from usual, I believe at 2 o'clock or 2:30, I'll need to double check my schedule. I will actually be a guest on Sino the Crocodile stream. We will be playing Monster Prom 2 and doing voices for the characters. So I don't know which monsters I will be voicing, but I will be there. And depending from what I was told yesterday, depending on what options are chosen, there could be some very spicy endings for all the monsters. So, either way, I will see you all on Friday at 2 p.m. EDT, which I believe is 6 p.m. GMT. So I will see all of you then. Look out for that announcement. I'll post it on Twitter the day of. I try to post at least an hour, if not 2 hours before stream, just as a friendly reminder. So if you're not already following me, let's grab the socials. If you're not already following me on Twitter, please do so. That is probably my most active social besides here on Twitch. And I will see you guys on Friday. Thank you for listening, my dear Librophiles. Let's find somebody equally lovely as Phaedra to go right into. And I appreciate each of you that stuck around after the raids. Wild had a raid, Phaedra had a raid. It was a good day for raids. Let's see who's out there. Who shall be free? Um. Da 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 da. Okay, so there's some great people today. So Miss Lala VT is a diner waitress, amazing VTuber. She's playing some Fallout 76. Basil Wolf, another fantastic VTuber artist, is doing some art today. Ava's doing some chatting. Little Nicto is playing some Phasmophobia. Also, talented musician. You're very welcome, Fallen. Thank you for sticking around and listening. It was great watching you stream earlier today. I know Vil is having a discussion on muscle mommies today. Harlequin is doing some art. That would be nice to go visit Harlequin. Is there any readers today? Let's see who's reading in the just reading category, and maybe we'll find someone. Somebody new reading. Let's see. Reading fun. Poetry, Humpty Dumpty, and continuing. It breaks my heart that so few people are reading at this hour. Maybe somebody in ASMR. I was hoping that Neff or someone was reading. Various women. Oh. Oh, these are the textural ASMR, touching the microphone and sounds. Yeah, no, not so much. Reading. We'll just look for reading. So this is Maud's book club. That might be good. I tell you what, let's go visit Harlequin and see what work they're working on. If you haven't given them a follow already, I highly recommend it. Talented artist. They did the 3D model for Tiger Fae, which turned out beautifully. I can't wait to see it getting used more often. It'll be nice. All right, let's go visit Harlequin VT. Harlequin VT. All right. All aboard the train. Let's do a little leaving the library with a little raid emote. I hope all of you enjoy the new emotes, and as soon as my live 2D model is ready, I will be adding more emotes, as well as I have some more animated ones from the same creator that did Blanky and the new emotes, that is Yuki. I will be adding those as soon as my model is ready. So here is the raid message. So if all of you could just follow along and copy that, that's just a follower emote. So all of you should be able to use it. Let's go say hi to Harley. All right, alley-oop, let's go.